Hey, it's Mikexingchen. You know, the mystery of what comes after death is one that almost every scientist, philosopher, and religious individual has tried to interpret and understand with no success. As far as everything about the topic is concerned, the only way to find out what really lies beyond the veil of death is really just to experience death itself, but we all know that's something that we literally cannot come back from. So all we really have are stories from people who have had close calls with the Grim Reaper in the so-called near-death experience. Of course, many of these stories talk about a bright and shining light beckons to them to the great beyond. Some even profess hearing an angelic choir welcoming them to the pearly gates. However, there are those who have experienced the opposite. Dark visions of torment and evil are amongst the most common stories that unfold when people relay such visions of what they see as hell. A number of them even claim that they have seen the face of the devil himself. So in today's video, it is gonna get a little dark as we climb down to the abyss to explore these nightmarish story about the underworld. So from fire and brimstone to demonic entities, here are 5 unsettling visions of hell from near-death experiences. Number 5, the pit of despair and isolation. A man named Matthew Botsford was at an Atlanta restaurant when the last thing he heard before falling into a coma was 2 shots from a gun. With a bullet in his head, Botsford was put into a medically induced coma for 27 days, and in that coma, he had the most terrifying vision of the underworld that may have jolted him back to life. In his near-death experience vision, Botsford found himself in a nightmarish situation where his hands and legs were shackled and his body was suspended high above a gaping pit full of volcanic materials. On the ground directly below, he could make out shapes of creatures that were scuttling to and from the pit. What terrified him even more was the overwhelming feeling of isolation. He recalls hearing tortured screams echoing, but no other person was to be seen. Every so often, a team of demons and creatures would come visit him and cut flesh from his bones, flesh that would grow back instantly for those demons to feed on again as a form of eternal torment. He was then luckily spared from this eternal anguish when he saw a giant hand reaching from a wall near him, breaking him free from his chains and taking him away. Before he woke up from his coma, the last thing he heard from his vision were the words, "It's not your time." Number 4, the not so pearly gates. You know, often when people recall their near-death experiences, they talk about a bright light or the pearly gates of heaven. You know, like a brightly lit place in the clouds where there is a large ornamented gate made out of, I don't know, solid gold. And at least according to pop culture, at the gate is usually a lectern where a man with a beard as white as his robe, supposedly St. Peter, is waiting for us with a large book, looking like a heavenly maitre d'. But on the flip side, for people unfortunate enough to have a glimpse of hell, the scene is a whole lot less appealing. Where there is a golden gate waiting for the righteous, hell has its own version of a welcoming gate, but filled with ominous threats and terror. I guess pretty much like what the Black Gate of Mordor in Lord of the Rings may look like. Many who have almost crossed over to the other side reveal that it got hotter and hotter as they approached the gate, so hot that they could feel their skin burning just by standing in front of the gate. Their helpless and hopeless souls are then welcomed to the underworld as the gate swung open, rolling out the red carpet for their arrival into eternal suffering. Number 3, the infernal invitation. The life and faith of a devout atheist named Howard Storm was put to the test when a perforated stomach sent him on his way to the doorsteps of hell. After being rushed to the hospital, Howard Storm woke up in a daze and noticed that the people in his room could not hear him when he started asking what was going on. He even tried to stop someone walking towards him, but he was ignored and the person literally walked right through him. It was clear to him that he was already dead and was now pretty much a ghost walking aimlessly around the hospital. He said that towards the end of the hall, he noticed a large group of figures standing in front of a door who were calling out to him as if inviting him to join their group. Confused and clearly having nothing else planned for his afterlife, he decided to join the group and walk through the door with them. But on the other side, he entered a completely different world enveloped in thick fog. The figures from earlier urged him to walk on, their playful demeanor making the invitation a lot more pleasant. Storm said he turned to look back and would see his hospital room shrinking into the distance as he walked farther. But the further he walked, the smaller the fog-filled place became, kind of like an airy Willy Wonka corridor. Soon after, the figures who were with him turned sinister and began shoving and pushing him deeper into the hallway. They became more violent and began tearing him apart with their teeth, gnawing at his flesh. In his panic, Storm cowered and tried to shield himself from his demonic attackers and heard his own voice in his head asking him to do something completely out of character: pray. With his flesh being ripped from his body, the hard-lined atheist began screaming phrases like "one nation under God" and "our Father who art in heaven." And as if some kind of divine intervention was invoked by his screaming and shouting, Howard was pulled out of his nightmare and woke up in his hospital bed in one piece. Number Number 2, Worse Than War. The story of George Ritchie was one of the first, most widely circulated stories about near-death experiences in hell. His experience even led him to publish a book called Return to Tomorrow in 1978. In his story, after coming down with pneumonia during the Second World War, Ritchie recalled being brought to an army hospital in Virginia where he was later on pronounced dead. He said that he had an out-of-body experience and claimed that he was able to wander around town unhindered. And when he was just floating about, he met a strange figure who took him on a guided tour of another dimension. Like a scene from Dante's Inferno, the mysterious figure showed Ritchie various scenes of people and their spirits struggling in the alternate plane. One scene was at a bar where people tried their hardest to drink and smoke their cigarettes, but to no avail. The deeper Ritchie went on tour, the more terrifying the scenes began to unfold. One of these scenes took place in a wasteland where he saw gigantic figures locked in a wrath-fueled skirmish. Ritchie goes further into describing what he's seeing, saying even more hideous than the bites and kicks they exchanged or the sexual abuses many were performing in feverish pantomime. Perversions I never dreamed of were being vainly attempted all around us. Soon after, when Ritchie woke up from his feverish sleep, he would become a psychiatrist and publish several books regarding the phenomena of near-death experiences. Number 1, Total Recall. In 1991, a woman named Angie Finnemore attempted to take her own life, but instead got a dose of what may have come had her suicide become, in a word, successful. The first thing she recalled after losing consciousness was that she was subjected to a life review and has gone through up to the point where she attempted suicide. And after her own life review ended, Angie recalls that she was surrounded by a heavy blanket of darkness that seemed to stretch on to eternity. She thought she was completely alone when she heard voices around her saying, "Oh, we must be the suicides." Angie also realized that these words were being spoken directly into her head and that she too could communicate using her mind. However, no matter how hard she tried, she could not elicit any form of response from anyone around her. Later on, according to her story, she was thrown into a different part of hell that resembled an open field filled with lost souls aimlessly walking around. They seemed to be free to communicate with each other, but Angie noticed that misery had fully consumed all of them, and they could not look past it and make any effort to interact with anyone around them. Of course, whether all these visions are true or not, I guess we will never know until one day where we will all know. But personally for me, I do believe there's a place that people who are good go, and there's a place reserved for truly evil people like Hitler or Kim Jong-un. So for me, I guess what I'm trying to do is live my life the best I can, be as good of a person as I can, try to embody the principles of truthfulness, compassion, and tolerance, and hope for the best. Again, these are just what people said they saw during their near-death experiences, and you might not even believe in near-death experiences, but let me know what you guys think. Do you believe there is a hell? And if so, what do you think hell's like? Alright guys, thank you all so much for watching this video. I'll see you later.